How you doing, everybody out there? Coming at you a little later in the evening. It's funny, I was just the other day talking with my wife saying how cool it would be if we could start doing these like live at Brood or do like a live one a week or something where we sit down and we have a live studio audience at Brood. I thought it'd be kind of cool. But clearly, I cannot keep myself to a set schedule. I drove all over this state today. Well, not all over, but I went to a couple different political meetings today. So I'm running a little bit later on in the day, but hopefully you guys still join me. You still hit the share button for me. You let everybody know we're on. It's a little later. Like I said, it's 10:30, but hey, you know what? Laying in bed, give me a listen. And as always, this is available as a podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts as well, in most podcast areas. But do me a favor, hit the share button. Come on out to the coffee shop there at Brood when you can. Feel free to buy coffee online, broodco.com, BREWEDCO.com, and show your support, show your love for us. And once again, hit that share button. But today, we're going to be talking about Fayette County schools not requiring a temperature check. I went to an event here in Fayette County that Senator Alvarado, State Senator Alvarado, was speaking at, kind of go over some of the things I heard from him. As well, I was up in Northern Kentucky at the Tea Party meeting up there today where Thomas Massie spoke, and he talked about a couple different things I'll go over. Does Mitch McConnell have a point about corporate America? I've been hearing a lot of different things on that. I'm going to weigh in for you guys on kind of what he was saying. I think he had a point of sorts that he was trying to get to that he either isn't elegant enough or too turtly to be able to get out of his mouth. And then, we're going to cover a little bit about positive, negative rights because I think it's really important discussion to have as we go into this and prepare ourselves to talk about vaccines. And it's really important concept for people to understand what a positive and negative right are. But please give us a share. And thank you for joining us. We're going to dig on into it today. So, Fayette County schools not requiring a temperature check anymore. First, my son goes to Fayette County Public Schools. I should do a better job of paying attention because I didn't know they were checking his temperature to begin with when he walked in. Now, of course, I've heard some arguments about temperature checks. One of the things being, is checking your temperature a medical procedure and you have to have a trained person to do it? I don't know. Though I do remember, and somebody can weigh in if they disagree with this statement, but I do remember at one point that it came out that temperature checks, because you wouldn't get a temperature till you were already past the point where you could spread or your highest spreading. Basically, I remember at one point the CDC saying that temperature checks were not a good indicator of whether or not you had COVID. I do remember that being the case. Because, of course, that's a fear thing too as well. But, it's asymptomatic. You could not have a fever. But we kept doing temperature checks. So, but on that subject, them not doing temperature checks, there's a lot of other weird anti-science-y things we do. I'll give you an example, still dealing with Fayette County Public Schools. And I think this is a mix of fear theater. I think it's not great to be around our children because it does instill in them there's a huge fear they need to be afraid of. And remember, now the state counts probable COVID cases. So the state of Kentucky has us at 2 COVID deaths under 20. However, the CDC does not count probable cases, only confirmed. So the CDC has Kentucky at 0. COVID deaths currently, and the state has us at 2. So remember, according to the CDC, that there have been 0 deaths in the state of Kentucky under 20. Quite frankly, COVID is not a large risk to young children or young adults. But yet, when I go to pick up my kid every day, there is a teacher standing out on a sidewalk, nowhere near anybody, wearing a mask as she waves them forwards. Now, it's weird that it's weird to me to see them engaging in such these teachers of our children to be engaging in these anti-scientific behavior. And I think a lot of us, as far as the masking goes, I know for me as well, this whole COVID thing, I think a lot of it is there's clearly a lot of science that doesn't make sense. For example, it clearly doesn't make sense if I drop a mask, it is healthy for me to pick it up and put it on. It quite quite clearly, doesn't make sense for this teacher to be standing outside, away from everybody, wearing a mask. That is unscientific. It's just not scientific, right? And so, and I think part of it is if the CDC came out with common sense things, that they weren't doing these things like pushing. I remember once, I believe Jill and Joe Biden were walking their dog outside wearing a mask. Of course, we had Andy Bashir taking a picture wearing a mask while they're outside at caves, nobody around them. And I think it's just that lack of common sense surrounding it that sent up my antennae, my tyranny, I guess, antennae, my this is a weird situation antennae. And not only that, but you saw a lot of anti-science things going around. For example, I do remember at one point too as well that we thought it was transmissible on surfaces, and then it wasn't, and then it was. And then for some reason, when we first opened, restaurants all had to use paper menus and couldn't use reusable plates. And then that changed. But then people didn't get the message. And then buffets, you still have to wear a glove when you touch utensils, even though I don't know. I don't know. I think that changed. I mean, there's a lot of confusion there. And then also, too, you have a mix of these businesses just making it up as you go. I think a great example would be Qdoba during the pandemic, probably still now. I once had asked them to not, or I wanted a bottle of water, or no, I want a glass of water. They're like, oh, we can only sell you bottled because of COVID. And granted, I think that was more so just something they were saying because they wanted to sell me a bottled water, probably. That was a company policy. They're like, haha, no more free water, right? And I think a lot of companies just use COVID as an excuse to do the things they never wanted to do in the first place. But it is this weird misinformation. I mean, I was in Fayette Mall here the other day, and we walked into the FYE there, and we weren't wearing a mask, and there was literally just me and my wife, and then these two staff way on the other side of the store, and they were like, hey, can you put on a mask? And I was like, I can browse around. I mean, it's kind of silly. It's just me, but maybe I'll put on a mask. So we say, okay, fine. And we take the disposable mask. Now, in general, if we are going to go to a business that requires a mask, a little thing that we do, we don't wear them. And then if they ask us to put them on, we still require them to give us one, just like a little protest we do if we have to go there. Now, there's plenty of times where I walk into a place, and if they require masks, I just don't go there because I personally, it's not mandated, and if we don't start talking with our dollars, they're never going to stop doing these things that just don't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't. It doesn't make sense that me, my wife, and two others are in a store that is 6,000 square feet, and yet we have to wear a mask. But anyway, so they put on a mask, and I'm like, okay, and we're wearing them. And this too as well, having fought with the health departments, I know that all you're required to do as a employer or as a business is if somebody comes in not wearing a mask and you say, can you put on a mask? Oh, I see. Or no, you can say, I see you're not wearing a mask. I'm going to assume you have a medical condition. And even during the mask mandates, that satisfies the health department's requirements. And I'm saying this as somebody who's had not one, not two, but three mass citations dismissed on these grounds of saying, well, did you ask those people if they had a medical condition? And they were like, no. And then it got dismissed because, quite frankly, the health department can't ask you if you have a medical condition. And as long as we say they said they had a medical condition, or we told them and it's a medical condition, we don't get cited for it. So anything beyond that is just the company pushing its own thing. But I can't even blame the company because there's so much misinformation on what exactly these things are. But anyway, so this FYE employee is like, hey, put on a mask. And then he goes, yeah, sorry, the CDC is out doing checks on people. Guys, this was 6 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday. All right, first off, the CDC doesn't do checks on no one. Also, the CDC has never explicitly required you to wear masks. It has always been suggested. I know because of my HB1 guidelines that I have posted on my door, it follows the CDC guidelines, and it says masks are suggested but not required. That's in their official writings. Also, The CDC isn't coming out to Fayette County Mall and Fayette Mall on a Thursday at 6 o'clock doing inspections. And you know what? Honestly, neither is the health department. And at that point, when he just made up something or had, I don't know, there's a rumor going around the mall, I was just like, never mind, I can't do this. And we took off the mask and we left. We literally left laughing at them. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in the world. But these are the things that go around. And so I think it's good that Fayette County isn't requiring temperature checks. I don't think it was ever very effective. Stopping the matter. I believe it was something we were doing to remind people that there's a virus out there and you should be fearful. In fact, it was never once required by mandate here in the state of Kentucky to do temperature checks before they come into a building. That was always something the businesses were doing because they were trying to appear to be safe. It was always safety, fear theater, whatever you want to call it. So, I think that's a good thing. But moving on to my interactions with legislators today, one federal, one state. Senator Alvarado, I went to a luncheon today in Fayette County. And guys, as a reminder, hit the share button. If you're just joining us, hit that share button. Anyway, so I went to hear Senator Alvarado speak at this luncheon. Now, Senator Alvarado, he's got a chunk of Fayette County and a bunch of other counties there. And not a bunch, just a few. But Senator Alvarado, he's actually a doctor. He's definitely not the worst state senator. I'm not his biggest fan. I know that, for an example, there was a mask bill put forward by Adrian Southworth to end the mask mandate here in Kentucky that Senator Alvarado shelved because he was the head of the Senate committee that bill landed in, and then he never put it on the schedule to have a hearing, which is really weird considering he's a medical doctor that stood up there today and told us that he doesn't think masks are a good thing, and he certainly didn't wear a mask. So it was a little confusing to me on why he did that. Of course, I think it's all a political thing where they're worried about scaring, because the people who don't wear masks won't vote for you because you didn't allow masks kind of thing, where, it's this soft tyranny, I guess I'd call it. Here's a great example. I always say is like when people ask me, there's times in these podcasts where, and you can sometimes tell, where I'm about to swear and I stop myself or I say some other weird, strange word. And the reason why is because there's people out there who don't like swearing. And so I'm not going to swear to alienate those people, but at the same time, the people who are okay with swearing aren't not going to watch if I don't swear. And so I think they view the mask thing as that kind of issue. They don't realize that it is a soft tyranny issue that we're going to get to here at the end. But, that's my major criticism of him that really paid attention. Of course, as well, he's involved in that Senate committee education bill, HB 208, that passed. His committee did lift up the guidelines for when schools could be NTI only. He didn't do much more than that. But anyway, so what I'm seeing is he's not he's not terrible. He's just not super great. He's an senator, in my opinion. Other people have other issues. However, when he was talking and doing a legislative update, and he was making the same old tired mistake that I see GOP legislators making all the time. There are a lot of laws that were passed this year about shifting power around in the executive from the governor to the AG, even how the governor appoints senators, and a bunch of laws that passed. And the GOP does this constantly, where they will pass laws when they are in power, and what they do well when they are in power is pass laws that are very tailored to who's in that office. So they're passing a lot of laws, handing powers off to the AG's office because they like Daniel Cameron. And they think, I would like Daniel Cameron to have had these powers because they like him and he agrees with their politics. Now, however, the issue is if we just rewind to the last AG, who was it? Governor Beshear was our last AG, AG Beshear. Now, ask yourself this question, Senator Alvarado, or other people out there hearing me right now. Do you want all these powers you just gave to AG Cameron for AG Beshear to have had? Of course not. Of course you don't want them to have the same powers. And so while you're sitting there, he was championing bills that shifted around power, but they shifted around specifically for who was in office at this time. At this time. And I have a big problem with that. I don't like legislating for the times. I like permanently removing the power so that way other people can't use it against you. If you don't like the way the governor is handling the pandemic, you take away that power. You don't hand it to somebody else because you think, well, that person would have responded differently while in office. And that is one issue I had with a lot of what he was covering. Is just, I don't believe we should be making bills to fit who's in office. GOP, when they get power and they say, we're going to stop the Democrats, they go in and they grab those reins and they redirect it how they think they want to when we should be destroying the reins. That's what you ran on most of the time anyways. Just follow through. I also was up in northern Kentucky today at a Tea Party meeting. It was a very large Tea Party meeting, seeing a big resurgence in the Tea Party movement. I want to try to lobby them to change the name to the Coffee Party because, well, I don't know. I just think that would be funny to call it the Coffee Party in the honor of Beans and Brood, spurring on a political movement in Kentucky. However, who knows? Who knows if I can get that done? Probably not, but, I won't be offended by it. So I was at this Tea Party meeting, and Thomas Massie's there, and he's speaking, and he spoke about a lot of good things. Now, do I agree with Massie 100% of the time? No, I do not. However, what I think sets Massie apart from a lot of other congressmen, and I've had conversations with Andy Barr as well, in the same way that I've heard Massie talk, I've heard Andy Barr talk. And one of the things that Massie does very well is he has a philosophy. And Massie has a philosophy, and if you asked him why he did what he did on a bill or on a vote, he will explain it. And regardless if you think he has remained constant or not, he will be able to explain what he did, and it will be consistent with his constant and stated philosophy. I'll give you a good example of this that occurred here in the state. Adrienne Southworth did a vote on historic horse racing, and she voted no against gambling. Now, she's a Liberty person. Generally, Liberty people vote yes on gambling, as it is not the government's job to regulate quote-unquote sin. And, I asked her about it. I said, Senator Southworth, why did you vote this way on that specific thing? And she gave me her reasoning. It was very clear. She said, I didn't like how the historic horse racing industry mixed with the horse racing happened. I didn't like the bill because it hands the powers off to a cronyism to a couple of companies while not allowing other people to get involved. So basically, you have to have a horse track to be able to build a historic racing space. And basically it was, if we're going to allow gambling, then we allow gambling. And if we don't, we don't. We shouldn't just allow it for certain people. And also the way they achieved it was a very backdoor kind of cruddy way of doing it. And I concur with that. So though I may personally agree with votes like Savannah Maddox had, another Liberty legislator in the House, where she voted yes on it, and Adrienne voted no, Senator Southworth voted no, that I can at least sit there and say, well, you have a Liberty reason for what you just did, and I can at least understand that. I may disagree with your outcome, but your reasoning has been principled and falls in line with what you stated. You didn't squish, you didn't change your mind, even maybe it was hard to go against the grain. You did stay true to what you said, and I think Thomas Massie falls in that same category for me. Now, what was interesting when Thomas Massie was speaking is he was, and we made a post about this, he was talking about the CDC line. And he mentioned, he told the story, and the recordings are available online as well. You can go back to the post, somebody posted them. And he mentioned about how he has recordings of the CDC. So Pfizer and Moderna did studies on the effects of the vaccine with people who've already had COVID. And their study determined, and it was a public study, determined that it has no benefit to people who've already had COVID to get vaccinated. And yet the CDC put out guidance saying people who are vaccinated, people who've had COVID should still get vaccinated. And Thomas Massie called them up and said, hey, that's not correct. Don't you know about the study? Everything else. He has recordings. And they admitted it was not correct. And that must have been a mistake. And they'll be sure to fix it. And then they didn't fix it. And then he called him up again. And then when they finally fixed it, they didn't fix it to say, if you've had COVID, there's no discernible benefit to getting vaccinated. Instead, he has said that they changed it to be even more confusing. Now, the reason why this is kind of reprehensible is because obviously there are side effects to getting vaccinated. And if there are individuals that get no benefits from something but only have a downside, being that they would get vaccinated and then go ahead and have a negative reaction to it, and that would cause the issues for them, that is morally a reprehensible thing. Everybody should be informed 100% on what they're doing. Just like I think it's very important as they opened up vaccinations to 16 plus, that everybody knows that nobody, according to the CDC, has died in Kentucky under 20 from COVID, because I think you need to make an educated risk decision. And in this case here, the CDC wasn't putting out educated risk decisions. And Massie brought up as to why. And he mentioned that they're lying to you, and they're lying to you because they look through things through one prism. They look through things. They don't care about your individual life as a whole. They look at the entirety. Let me give you an example here of times they've admitted they were lying, specifically Fauci. Fauci came out, he did a 60-minute interview where he sat there and said there's no benefit to masks. In fact, the constant face touching and everything else that we ourselves have said is a terrible thing and you probably shouldn't do, is to not wear masks. Masks might even be bad. Then like a week or two later, he comes out and says, nope, you need to wear masks. And when asked why, he said, verbatim, like almost word for word, I don't have the exact quote. He said, yeah, I was worried about there not being enough supplies of masks for first responders, doctors. And once it became clear we had enough masks for the doctors, then we came out and said you can wear masks because we didn't want you taking them all from the doctors. So he admitted that A, he lied originally. This is his words. He lied originally. And then he said he lied in a way that if masks are the magical cure to COVID, we should be storming his house right now, which is how I know all you COVIDians don't really believe masks are the magical cure, because you'd be demanding Fauci be thrown out on his butt for having for 2-3 weeks came out and said don't wear masks and then killed Americans in order to manipulate people because him, a non-logistics expert, was making a logistical decision over how many masks they had. That would be what you're really doing. But you're not. You're not. So either A, you don't believe masks really exist, or B, you're okay with your health people lying to you. In fact, when you say trust the experts, are you saying I trust them even when they admittedly lied to me to get me to behave in a certain way? I think you do, COVIDians. And so look at Fauci. He admitted he lied for what he thought was the greater good. And keep in mind, Fauci is nothing more than a infectious disease specialist. He's not an economy specialist. He's not a mental health specialist. All he looks at is a disease. I remember back when I was fighting the lockdowns by staying open, and people asked me, they said, Andrew, shouldn't we listen to the experts? I say, well, not all the experts are in the room. For if you're closing down restaurants, shouldn't you have a restaurant owner in the room because they're an expert on restaurants? Because Andy wasn't talking to any restaurants. And there's a couple people that mocked me for it. Be like, why would a restaurant owner be an expert on infectious disease? They're not. However, you're asking them to close restaurants. So maybe you should bring in a restaurant owner who's an expert on restaurants to talk about that. When you're going to get your car fixed and you bring in an electrical engineer and you don't bring in a mechanic, guess what? They're going to be looking for an electrical problem. Why? Because that's what they're trained in, is electric. So we weren't even talking to all the experts, but so he comes out, he admits, hey, I lied to you. Yeah, my bad. But now you should wear masks. Right, so either he's lying now about wearing masks or he's lying then. Doesn't matter. Regardless of what side of the aisle you're falling on this issue, regardless of where you fall, Fauci lied to you and manipulated you to do something, and he admitted to it. He then did it again. He then came out on national TV and said that he was moving the goalposts of where herd immunity would occur because he wanted to create a false sense of light at the end of the tunnel. So that way we would keep our hopes up and keep working, but he lied to us about. So Fauci himself has already admitted not once but twice that he is willing to lie to us about what the science actually says in order to get a certain behavior out of us. So why would this CDC be lying about this? It's really simple, and this is what Massie mentioned, and I think he's got a lot of points here. The CDC's worried that people without having gotten a antibody test will believe that they've gotten COVID. And then they'll say, well, I've already had COVID. I don't need to get vaccinated. If they come out and say getting vaccinated if you've had COVID has no discernible benefit. So they are on purpose holding back information, giving you misleading information to control your behavior, because they're worried that you might make a decision for yourself about not getting vaccinated. That's definitely suspect, and I think that's definitely a problem. And I think that goes in even more so into we shouldn't be taking this whole vaccine passport and thing lightly when we know and have recordings of our experts admitting that they are lying to you in order to try to control your behavior. Now, McConnell. Let's talk about Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has come out and stated that he doesn't think these corporate companies should be getting involved in politics. Now, I think McConnell has side of the point kind of doesn't. It's kind of, obviously I'm okay with companies getting involved in politics as we are a company who got involved with politics. And if I'm okay with doing it on my side, I have to be okay with you guys doing it on your side. In fact, you guys have been doing it for a long time. For an example, there's a coffee shop in town here that on their name tags, I do believe on their name tags, I know on their website, has people's pronouns listed, him, her, his. Now, of course, they don't see that as political. But that is a political statement. You are taking a political stand as a coffee shop. In fact, part of the reason we've been successful coming out is because conservative people know they have a coffee shop to go to, because the liberal viewpoint is so obvious in so many other coffee shops when they hang rainbow flags and Black Lives Matter flags, and they put him, her, his, and theys and thems and who's ever's on their name tags, and they put out love everyone and all these other political statements. They are political statements. So they're already getting political. Now, what McConnell's trying to say, he's just not elegant enough to say it. He also doesn't want to say this quiet part out loud. Is, guys, you lobby us specifically to give you legislation. If you start coming out and falling very politically, publicly on one side of the aisle or the other, it will become unpopular with our voters to give you those breaks. For an example, a Republican in Georgia can now run on a platform taking away tax breaks to the Atlanta Braves. They're also putting out they're also dealing with Delta got tax breaks from the state legislature. They took away. And you can run on that platform now. And his warning is saying, guys, I like cronyism. Mitch McConnell loves cronyism. It has made him a very rich man. It has made him politically very powerful as he wields the ability of money. Mitch McConnell loves cronyism. And he's saying, guys, if you keep coming out so woke about all these issues, we can't keep engaging in our cronyism. That's the point he's really trying to say. He can't say it out loud because, of course, he'd be admitting that he engages in cronyism. But, of course, we all know he does. And I'm sorry if you're shocked to hear McConnell engages in cronyism. I don't know what to tell you but to pay better attention. He quite clearly does. He has sold out Kentucky on a number of issues. And so he doesn't want to say that quiet part out loud. And so he's saying companies stay out of this politics side of things, this corporate America. We give you too many bailouts, tax breaks, tax incentives, regulations that favor your size and help lock out competition. And you pay us for doing it. If you start coming up publicly like this, we won't keep engaging with you on this pay-to-play politics. That's McConnell's point. And I'll tell you this much. I do not believe an airline that has been bailed out by the government several times has the same rights to being a private company as a coffee shop does. But if you're saying you're willing to give up all of your tax incentives, tax breaks, and cronyism benefits, in return, you can be as politically involved in wokeness and liberalness and even conservativeness as you want, I agree with you. Let's do it. So McConnell's right in the sense that if they keep engaging this way, it will change the face of politics because they won't be able to engage in cronyism. I just happen to like that outcome. I like these companies getting political if it means they're going to get all their tax incentives taken away. Because I don't like cronyism. I like capitalism. I like free markets. I don't like using the government to lock out your competition, to get incentives, and to make it easier for you to operate as a business. I don't like it. So I think he does have a point. I just don't think I agree with him, but he's got an important point to make. Now, I made a post about this earlier today, and I think it's worth talking about a little bit further and more uniquely as you guys are out there and you're debating and engaging on the vaccine debate, and I encourage you to do so. Continue to debate and engage. Debate and engage as much as you can on these things. Don't let them pass. But let's talk about positive and negative rights. So positive and negative rights. So the Constitution is a document of negative liberties. Even Obama agrees with this. What's that mean? It means that it is a limitation on what other people can do to you. A positive right, that's a negative right, a limitation on what people can do to you. A positive right is something I get from somebody. Now, as in my view, and the view, I believe, of the Constitution, that for me to have a right to something from you, a positive right, we have to knowingly engaged in a contractual agreement, whether it be spoken or unspoken. So you have negative rights guaranteed by your birthright. I believe you can only get positive rights if you've contractually somehow agreed with the party you're getting those rights from. Remember, negative rights are something you're born with. Positive rights you get from somebody. So for an example, when people say health care is a human right, is a right. I have a right to health care. Well, no, kinda, I guess. You're forgetting a descriptor. You have a you can have a positive right to health care, which means that if I walk into a hospital and I engage your services, I now have a right to you treating me. Just like our police, you have a right to have the police respond when you call because you pay your taxes, and they have contractually agreed to respond to your calls when they took your tax dollars. That's a positive right. However, negative rights always trump positive rights. Your right to not be vaccinated trumps another person's right to not get sick from you. Let me explain. First, everybody knows that COVID is out there. Do you have an undue expectation of safety? What I mean by that is are you unaware COVID is out there? Are you unaware there could be people out there carrying it around? Are you unaware when you walk into a business what its rules are? That's why in HB1, I was a big pusher of the amendment that made it to where you had to publicly post your plan. And it just had to be a plan, and it had to be publicly posted on your door and on your website. The idea being for people to start paying attention to it, and then you can make your own educated decisions. So if you do not have an undue expectation to safety, you are now willingly engaging into going out and operating. Now, you do not have an expectation to be free from a virus when you leave your house. However, you do have a right to not be forced by somebody else to get vaccinated, to wear masks, to do other things that revert you from what I call neutral. Right? So it's normal for you to breathe without a mask on your face. If I want you to breathe with the mask on your face, I'm now asking something from you. You are in no way asking anything from me for you to breathe without a mask on your face before you are in your natural state. Now, when you hear people argue about this, they'll be like, well, shouldn't you have to get vaccinated so I don't get sick? First off, I don't think that's how the vaccine works. I thought the vaccine only protects you, but it helps us get to herd immunity or something, which is an esoteric idea in the first place. Like, because I'm not vaccinated, and if you are vaccinated, I don't give you the virus necessarily. Like, that's not how it works. But let's pretend it does even, okay? I have to get vaccinated so you don't get the virus. No, you want something from me. What you just stated there was a positive right. And my negative right of not having to inject a vaccine in me trumps your positive right because we have not entered into a contractual agreement and you do not have an undue expectation of safety from me. Now, a lot of times when you guys get into these debates, people will sit there and say, oh, what about when you go out driving and a person hits you? Isn't it their fault? Yes, it is. Because in that situation, one would say you've engaged in not even just engaged, you have entered into a contractual agreed upon circumstances that says you will drive on the right side of the road and you will follow all traffic laws and you won't drive drunk because you don't necessarily have a right to drive. So when you enter into the agreement, when you get your driver's license that says I will do X, Y, and Z, which is the traffic laws, that is the agreement you've entered to. And when I exit my house and get into my vehicle, I do have an expectation of safety saying you don't cross the lane and hit me. I do have an expectation of safety based upon the communal non-spoken / spoken through your driver's license agreement that says that you will not drive drunk and hit me. You will not knowingly exceed the speed limit in a way that endangers my life. And there's an argument on speed limits too, but the point is no, it is not because you've engaged in that. For an example, when we talk about my body, my rights, you'll see a lot of things come up too about the abortion debate. There is a unspoken agreement that is then wrote down through child care laws, child abuse laws, that says when a child is at least right now born, that you have an expectation of care because you knowingly had that child. All I'm stating when I believe that abortion should not be allowed is that contractual agreement begins at conception. Once you've had sex and you make a baby, you now have entered into a contractual agreement with that baby in your belly that says you are in charge of its care, and you knowingly entered into that agreement when you engaged in intercourse. And I believe it is the government's position to enforce contracts. So if I have signed an agreement with you that says I will get vaccinated, I have now given up my negative right in return for your positive right in return for some sort of response. For an example, another example of this would be if I hire somebody to lay the floors in my house and I pay them to do that, I now have a right to them laying the floors in my house. I have a contractual right that is enforced by the government. You cannot have a contractual right to be vaccinated. You cannot have a contractual right to wear a mask, for that is beyond your natural point. And it obviously can impede your ability to live. Now, I hear people trying to argue, well, you have to wear clothes when you go out. Somebody had a great response for this, in the sense that they said, yeah, but you don't have to breathe through your nipples. And until then, it's not the same thing. And they're true. I mean, it's not the same thing at all. Having to wear a shirt is nothing like covering your face with a mask that may even be harmful to your health. On top of that, to claim you have a right to make me get vaccinated when there are known side effects such as death that occur with the vaccination, you have a hard time of telling me that your fear of death, the fact that I may kill you somehow through some esoteric function of me getting COVID, and then somehow we run together and then you happen to somehow catch it because you're not protected, and then that is my fault. You do not have the right to make me get vaccinated because of that fear when the vaccine does have negative side effects. Because now you're asking me to risk my life, even if the risk is smaller, which we'll see what the VAERS comes back with. But I have a feeling to young adults, people under 30, that this vaccine is actually more deadly than COVID and killed more people than COVID has. But anyways, mainly because the people under 30 have so few dead. But you do not have the ability to demand me to risk my life at all because you're afraid of me somehow risking your life. That is not how the Constitution works. That's not how rights work. That's not how it works. It's just not it. You got to learn the difference between positive and negative rights. That's all I have for you guys this evening. Thank you for joining me. It's awfully late at night. Of course, as I said, I had to go to Northern Kentucky for this one. Go to Northern Kentucky. Came back down here. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you want to support, you can go to brewedco.com, brewedco.com. You can also come by the coffee shop there in Lexington, Brewed. And I thank you guys for joining me.